We're going to begin today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling out some world leaders today, including Prime Minister Mark Carney.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
The striking comments come after two Israeli embassy staff were killed last night. Yaron Leshinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram were gunned down leaving an event in Washington. The embassy says that couple was about to get engaged. The suspect, 31-year-old Elias Rodriguez, has been arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He's also been charged with murder of foreign officials, causing death with a firearm, and discharging a firearm in a crime of violence. Police say the suspect chanted "Free Palestine" after he was arrested. Netanyahu specifically named the leaders of France, the UK, and Canada as those countries released a joint statement earlier this week threatening sanctions against Israel if it does not stop a renewed military offensive in Gaza. But Canada has other grave concerns with Israel. Israeli Defense Forces shot near Canadian diplomats in the West Bank yesterday. You're looking at video from Jenin yesterday. You can see people fleeing as gunshots go off in the vicinity. 4 of the people nearby during this incident were members of a Canadian diplomatic delegation. Ottawa says 2 Canadians and 2 local staff members were on a tour of the city at the time. The IDF has said it was firing warning shots after the group went off an approved route. There's a lot to discuss with Israel's ambassador to Canada, Idil Moed, who joins me now. Ambassador, it's nice to see you. Thank you for coming in on what I'm sure is a very difficult day.
Thank you for having me.
Prime Minister Carney condemned the shooting this morning in the strongest of terms, and yet he was still called out by your government. What did you think of the statement Prime Minister Carney made this morning?
We have to look at the latest steps in a sort of a holistic approach. We see that there is a condemnation of Israel. We see that there are threats directed at Israel if it continues its defensive operation. And we see that the incident that you just showed right now, when you see people not fleeing but just walking away because they hear some gunshots, and you see the official steps that have been taken by the government of Canada. And I'm asking myself, where is this leading? We've had disagreements throughout the years, very strong sometimes, in a relationship that's been built by many people for about 76 years.
Sure.
Within those disagreements, I don't think there have been many instances that Canada directed threats at Israel in a military operation or in the midst of a war.
It is an unprecedented time, though, is it not?
And I'm not sure that many of my predecessors were also summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs because warning shots were fired in the air. So the question is at the moment, where are the relations going? And what we are saying, what Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying, is not only did Hamas thank Canada once, this is the first time for this government, but previous government was also thanked by Hamas. One must itself, where is this going? Is this the right side or the wrong side? So I'm not saying, of course, in no way or sense that Canada is supporting Hamas. That's very clear. It's a listed terrorist organization also here in Canada. But the question is, where are we going?
Okay, so let's take these one by one, because I think it's important to sort of say there's the issue with the statements from both Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar this morning saying, and I'm going to quote the Foreign Minister, "There's a direct line connecting anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli incitement to this murder, the murder in Washington. This incitement is also done by leaders and officials of many countries and international organizations, especially from Europe." Is Canada included in that list there's a direct line connecting these kinds of attacks to statements by Canadian officials?
What we are talking about is not accusations against Canada or anything. We are talking about an atmosphere that is brewing. And when somebody as deranged as that terrorist in Washington picks up a weapon and feels that he's emboldened and he can kill people in the middle of the street, then something is happening that can be and must be stopped. Deterrence comes also from the top down. So when anti-Semitism becomes so lethal that people are being shot in the street, I think it is most important for all of us, and especially for Israel, that is the homeland of the Jewish people around the world. It is extremely important that all steps and measures are taken to protect the Jews. And right now, what I hear in Canada for quite a long time is that the Jewish community feel that they are less safe, that they are less protected than they should be. And we look at the numbers and we see the rise of 670% in the number of incidents against Jews, who are only 4% or 1% of the population. So there is something going on here, and so this is very worrying for us, for Israel. But again, we have our very open and frank discussions with Canadian government. We've always had them, but at this point in time, we are in a sort of a time that we have to decide how we will proceed.
Canada, as you say, has supported Israel. Canada stood by Israel after the barbaric attacks on October 7th. Canada supported Israel's right to defend itself in the war that it started to prosecute in Gaza immediately afterwards. The statement that came from Canada, France, and the UK only came after this new level of expansion into Gaza, saying we strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's military operations in Gaza. The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable. The amount of basic food and aid that's getting in is, quote, wholly inadequate. These are not outlandish statements, and yet they are getting the kind of response from both the foreign minister and now the prime minister of Israel that really push back quite hard on something that I think a lot of people would frankly agree with, that there is a whole new level of a military operation in Gaza where the prime minister himself has said Israel intends to not just but maintain control of Gaza whenever this military operation wraps up. It's been almost 600 days now.
You know that Israel has a capability of conquering Gaza in half a day. That's not a problem. But the question really that we're asking ourselves is, what are we doing? There are 58 hostages being held in Gaza for almost 600 days. I didn't hear that number raised here up until now.
Well, here we are. And the Israeli delegation left Qatar so it wouldn't continue the negotiations.
Hostages are being held in Gaza. 58 families in Israel. Actually, many more of them, of course, but 58 families are agonizing for almost 2 years about their loved ones. Some of them know that they are still alive, and some know that some of them, at least one of them, is the family of Judy Weinstein-Hagi, a Canadian Israeli. And I didn't hear anybody even mention her name. So I just wonder, we are talking about people's lives. We are talking about a terrorist organization that was set out to destroy the state of Israel. Israel made very clear, we have 3 goals. Make sure Hamas is not in control of Gaza, make sure that Hamas will not pose a threat to Israel, and release of the hostages. And we are adamant at attaining all 3. This is what the Prime Minister is repeatedly saying. When another country like Canada steps in and says, well, you have to stop your operation because of whatever reason, we have to put that aside. And
what Canada is saying is that the expansion of the operation into Gaza is not acceptable to them. That this idea that Israel is going to not just take but maintain control of Gaza, there's all this talk of expelling Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. They're saying that's a line too far. That is the work of allies and friends, to say to their allies and friends when they think it's gone too far, is it not?
Well, there's a way to do it. And I'm saying that in 76 years, we've had wonderful and sometimes less wonderful, sometimes less vocal, sometimes more vocal exchanges on all levels. And I've been part of it for the last 2 years almost.
For sure.
And so when the choice of a new government is immediately to step out in the open and to come out with formal accusations and formal summons and so on, the response from the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, is very clear. That this is not the way that we see it conducive, not to the situation and not to the relations. And so if there's a choice to be made, I'm not going to argue whether the arguments of Canadian and French and British government are right or wrong. That is something that we can debate. My role as emissary, as ambassador, is to do my best to assure that our relations are the best they can be. And they are very good relations. They are very solid foundations for the relations. And we have to protect them when times are difficult and when times are good. And this is where we are right now, and this is what I'm talking about. My role is to protect those relations. And I'm thinking that when we go out all officially and we start blaming and threatening, that is not very helpful.
You've mentioned being summoned to the foreign ministry after this incident in Jenin a couple of times. Let's talk about that. You went to the foreign ministry today. What did you tell them?
Well, that's an internal conversation. That's why we do it behind closed doors, as you may understand. But the Israeli Defense Forces reaction came out long before any request for information came from the Canadian government, just because our military have a standard operating procedure. Once we realized that they were diplomats on the spot, the
They had
chief
approval
of
to be
command,
there. We knew, everybody knew they were diplomats.
let me finish. What I'm saying is that once the soldiers understood and once the command understood that this is the situation there, because the soldiers apparently didn't know and the higher command in the region didn't know, and the commander of the liaison force, the COGAT, both of them personally intervened to make sure, first of all, that the diplomats were safe, that they knew what was going on, that the soldiers, of course, perhaps went out of line, and so the IDF also published that they regret this incident. But beyond that, we investigate, and very easily, we also publish everything. It goes out immediately in English. There was a diagram, was very clear, and you can also see in a video that they went into the soldier. There was nothing to see. There was a barrier, a very clear barrier. So what was the idea to walk into that barrier unless you want to try and provoke something? So maybe they were led in there. I don't know. I don't want to speculate.
The notion that these diplomats traveling through the Palestinian part of Jenin were somehow provoking.
No, they were not traveling. They were led by Palestinian Authority people, because that was the whole idea. And that was what was coordinated with the Israeli authorities. They deviated from that line where they were supposed to go a street and a half and then turn right. And so if you look at it, at the videos, you can see that they really made an effort to confront the soldiers. So there is an issue that needs to be investigated. Maybe it's correct, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. It's for the investigation to reveal. But what we are doing is immediately coming out with our response directly. We take responsibility if there is anything that happens wrong. But again, this is an incident that in the past, similar incident took place, and when there was any reservation
have there been? I can't remember Canadian diplomats coming under fire in the West Bank by the
Nobody
IDF.
came under fire here.
There were shots fired.
There were shots fired in the vicinity, and we have to remember this is a live combat zone. It's a live combat. You've been in the region, so you know that when you're going into such a region, there may be a chance that shots will be fired somewhere in the vicinity. That's just a fact. So you don't see soldiers aiming at them. You see the soldiers very far away. The situation can be portrayed as you like, and words can be used in any way or shape or form. But what I'm saying is that we have taken responsibility for the investigation, for dealing with the diplomats and with governments that want to have that information, but there is no need to formally request as if, things like that are not happening naturally. Actually, I've been preempting many issues many times, and I've been sending information, be it on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, be it on any other incident or event that is happening, just because I know that the Canadian government is very curious, very concerned. We know that, we respect that, and we work for that to make sure that they get the information in time. And we've done it time and again. And just curiously, that up until now, there was no such an event that we were summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to give any explanation, because we always provide the information.
Well, and much as perhaps you've never heard of somebody being called into the foreign ministry, I haven't heard of diplomats being in the vicinity of shots being fired, if that's the hair we're going to split on what we're calling that. Back to the statement, and I just want to ask really quickly. The statement says that this is too far. The notion that Israel will take and maintain control of Gaza for the long term, and that the amount of aid not getting in is not adequate. Are steps being taken to try to address that on a diplomatic front? We
informed that also on the same day that we decided to give a chance to the American plan, to the US plan, and this is what we are doing right now. So there is a very sharp increase in the number of trucks going in. Again, that's not reported, but that's a situation
it's
on the
reported.
ground.
We've seen it on TV all day.
Yes, I know, but you have three leaders here coming out very quickly with a threat while this whole thing is unfolding. And when it comes to the military operation, of course, again, whatever threat there will be, the threat to our hostages is what concerns us. So if there is any kind of threat from Canada or from any other country, we'll have to deal with that. But what we are looking at is the release of 58 hostages being held by Hamas, making sure that Hamas is not there anymore and doesn't threaten the people of Israel in any way, shape, or form in the future.
Will the Israeli delegation go back to Qatar to resume those negotiations to get those hostages free?
When the Prime Minister will instruct them, they will, for sure.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you for
I
having
understand
me.
it's been a difficult week, so we're grateful you're here. Israel's ambassador to Canada, Ido Moed.